about reflection like breathing. The inhale brings things in, insight, awareness, and understanding. But a breath that goes in and never comes out isn't breathing, it's holding. And I think many of us are world-class inhalers. We are exceptional at taking it all in. The exhale, that's where most of us have been quietly afraid to go. The exhale is the decision before all the data is in. The conversation you have, even though you're nervous. The yes you say before you feel ready. The exhale isn't the absence of growth. It is the whole point of it. Hi there, I'm Wendy Rimmelsbacher, and welcome to the podcast show, Dim to Daring. Do you feel like there's something bigger waiting for you, but you're not sure how to make it happen? You're in the right place. I'm here to bring you inspiring stories, powerful insights, and practical strategies to help you reignite your spark, realign with your purpose, and take those bold steps towards the life you were meant to live. Let's dive in, because you're not finished yet. You're just getting started. There's a word I've been sitting with lately, a word I didn't even know I needed until a friend of mine said it out loud, completely casually, like she wasn't about to rearrange something in my brain. I had called her to invite her to a live local workshop, the kind of afternoon where a small group of women gets together, connects, and yes, I may have used the word reflect when I was pitching it to her. I also had another girlfriend coming, so I was trying to get the three of us together. She paused, and then she said she might sit this one out because she needed some time to unreflect. I actually pulled the phone away from my ear and looked at my phone and came back to her. I'm sorry, what did you just say? And she repeated it, unreflect. As in, she was deliberately choosing to stop thinking so hard about her own life for a little while. Now, here's what made this land differently for me. This woman is a librarian, a lifelong reader, someone who has spent her entire career surrounded by books, ideas, and the pursuit of knowing more. If anyone has a natural appetite for learning and growth, it's her. She's also deep in a continuing education program right now, journaling, processing, and writing about her experiences weekly. She is doing the work, all of it. And I think this continuing ed course may be sending her over the edge with too much time allocated for reflection. And yet there she was, on the other end of the phone, telling me she needed a break from her own thoughts. Now, when a librarian tells you she has consumed enough for a while, you listen. And I thought, how many of us are quietly in that same place right now, but haven't given ourselves permission to name it? Here's what I want to say gently, but clearly. The personal growth world has a blind spot. I talk a lot about the power of reflection, and it is powerful. I've built conversations, workshops, and a whole philosophy around the idea of getting honest with yourself, looking at your patterns, your beliefs, your choices, and asking hard questions. But somewhere along the way, for many women, reflection stops being a tool and quietly becomes a lifestyle. You reflect on your mornings, your relationships, your career, and your energy levels. You journal what you're grateful for, what you're afraid of, what you want more of, and what you're finally ready to release. And I'm not saying any of that is wrong. I'm asking you to consider whether it's possible to do all of that beautifully and still be hiding. Because I've watched smart, self-aware women spend years becoming extraordinarily skilled at understanding themselves and far less practiced at actually moving. Reflection without action, well, it's just an elegant way of staying in place, in the status quo. And you know how I feel about that. You may already know this about me. I spent years as a CFO and accountant, and if you know anything about that profession, you know this. Accounting is built entirely on consistency, on precedent, on looking at how things were done before and following that same disciplined path forward. In many ways, I was wired for it, and the profession reinforced every bit of that wiring. The past was always the reference point. Historical data mattered. Prior year comparisons were important. Established processes that the whole organization relied on. But here's what I remember distinctly from those years. Whenever my team and I took on a new project, let's say a new system, new software, a new reporting requirement, something that needed our time and attention, I always asked the same question before we started. What can we stop doing to make room for this? Because I knew that adding something new without releasing something old wasn't a strategy. It was a pressure cooker, and we all felt it. Our systems were deeply relied upon, so nothing came off the list easily. But when we got creative, truly creative, we would always find something. A process we could streamline, a report we could automate, a monthly ritual that had outlived its purpose and was simply running on habit. And every single time we freed up that space, something better moved in. And I've thought about that question a lot since leaving that chapter of my career, because I think it applies just as powerfully to our inner lives as it ever did to a financial close process. What can you stop doing, stop thinking, stop processing, stop revisiting to make room for something new to take hold? Sometimes the most forward-looking thing you can do is decide what no longer needs to run. Think about reflection like breathing. The inhale brings things in, insight, awareness, and understanding. But a breath that goes in and never comes out isn't breathing, it's holding. And I think many of us are world-class inhalers. We are exceptional at taking it all in. The exhale, that's where most of us have been quietly afraid to go. The exhale is the decision before all the data is in. The conversation you have, even though you're nervous. The yes you say before you feel ready. The exhale isn't the absence of growth. It is the whole point of it. So how do you know when you've crossed the line from healthy reflection into overprocessing? Well, here are a few honest signals. The first one, you already know the answer. You've known it for a while, actually, but your mind keeps returning to the question, like it's searching for a better option. More thinking isn't going to produce a different truth. It's just going to delay the one you already have. The second signal, you're consuming growth content consistently, but not making moves. More frameworks, more perspectives, more episodes, and the decision you've been sitting with is still quietly on the shelf. Clarity doesn't usually arrive before the first step. It arrives because of it. And the third, and this one's subtle. Growth starts to feel like another obligation, another thing you should be doing more of, doing better, doing right. When evolving starts to feel like a performance review, that's not growth anymore. That's pressure wearing a self-help costume. I want to be precise here because this is not me telling you to stop growing. Unreflecting isn't checking out. It isn't numbing or avoiding or pretending everything is fine when it isn't. It's something far more intentional than that. It's stepping out of analysis mode and stepping back into experience mode. It's knowing what's in your rearview mirror and choosing to look through the windshield instead. Because the road you're on leads somewhere you've been dreaming about, and you can't get there staring at where you've already been. Sometimes that looks like a long walk with no agenda, and I mean that literally. There really is something that happens to your brain when your body is moving that no book or podcast can replicate. Ideas that have been stuck suddenly have somewhere to go. I've solved more problems on a run than I ever have staring at a journal page. Sometimes it looks like making a small decision more quickly than you normally would. Not carelessly, just without the internal committee meeting that lasts 3 weeks and reaches no conclusion. I laugh because I can easily get caught up here, but I'm getting better at catching myself and quickly moving forward. Sometimes it looks like saying yes to something that has nothing to do with your development at all, something that's purely fun, something that reminds you that your life is not a project to perfect. It's an experience to embrace. And sometimes this is the one I find most powerful. It looks like trusting what you already know, not digging for new insight, just living from the insight you already have and trusting it. Before I tell you about that afternoon at the workshop, I want to pause and speak directly to where you might be sitting right now as you listen. Maybe you're in the middle of a career transition, stepping away from something you built or stepping towards something you haven't fully named yet. Maybe you're recently retired. And if that's you, I want you to hear this clearly. Retirement is not the finish line. For many of the driven women I know, it's one of the most quietly disoriented seasons there is. You spent decades being defined by a title, a team, and especially a calendar full of purpose. And now the calendar is yours to fill. That kind of freedom can feel exhilarating and completely untethered at the exact same time. The temptation to overthink it, overplan it, over-reflect on who you are now that the role is gone, that's real. And this conversation is just as much for you. Maybe your transition has nothing to do with work at all. Your kids have moved out and the house feels different in a way you weren't quite prepared for. Or you're finding your footing after a divorce. Or you've lost a spouse or a parent. And with them, a version of your life and your future you had counted on. And for some of you, that loss came after years of being a caregiver. Years of organizing your life around someone else's needs. Losing them is grief twice over. You lose the person, and you lose the purpose that came with loving them well. If that's where you are, I'm not going to rush past that. Loss has its own timeline, and I respect it. But I will say this. Even in grief, even in the hardest in-between, there comes a moment when the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to stop replaying what was and take one small step into what is. Not because the past doesn't matter, but because you do matter. Whatever brought you to this episode today, this conversation belongs to you. The season you're in has a name, even if you haven't found it yet. And you are not behind. You are right on schedule. Remember my friend, the one who coined the phrase unreflecting? She ended up staying home that afternoon, doing anything except reflect. And I completely understood. She was honoring exactly what she needed. But I went. And the moment I walked in the door, something in me exhaled. There was energy in that room that you simply cannot manufacture, the kind that only happens when women who are genuinely paying attention to their lives end up in the same place at the same time. At some point, we found ourselves gathered by season. And what struck me, standing in that room, looking around at all of it, is that every woman there could have claimed a seat in more than one season. We've all had a season of holding steady for someone else, a parent, a child, a partner, when their needs came before our own. We've all had a season worth savoring, where we look back at what we built and finally let ourselves feel proud of it. And we've all stood at a threshold we didn't expect, a loss, a transition, a role that disappeared and left us wondering what comes next. And some of us are in a season of growth, deliberately choosing to expand, to step into something new, to claim this chapter as our own. But that afternoon, each of us was making a deliberate choice about where to plant our flag. Not because the other seasons don't matter. They do. But because right now, for our own wellness and our own becoming, this is where we were choosing to stand. I chose growth. And the conversation that unfolded in that room was honest in the way that only happens when everyone feels safe enough to tell the truth. I have to give credit to Judy, the woman who brought us together and created that space. If you want to know more about her and her work, I'll link our earlier interview in the show notes. She is definitely someone worth knowing. I drove home that afternoon knowing what I want my friends to understand about me in this growth season. More than that, I drove home knowing how important it is to surround myself with friends who truly get what I need right now. Friends who understand the season I'm in and show up for me accordingly. And I want that same thing for you. Choosing myself isn't selfish. Neither is it selfish for you. It's the work of expanding who we're each capable of becoming. Growth can look quiet from the outside and feel enormous on the inside. I need friends who can sit with me in the in-between without trying to rush me to the other side. Friends who don't need me to have a plan yet. Who trust that I know what I'm doing, even when I'm still figuring it out. And I need them to understand this. Staying in the status quo is not an option for me. It simply isn't who I am. What do I need from my friends right now? Presence over advice. The invitation more than the rescue. Someone who says, I see you in this, instead of, here's what you should do next. And certainly, I don't need them to say, why are you even doing all this? Because that question, however well-meaning, is really just asking me to make my growth more comfortable for someone else. I drove home that afternoon thinking about my friend on the other end of the phone call, the one who coined the phrase unreflecting in the first place. She hadn't come that day. She was deep in her studies, worn down from months of doing the hard internal work, and she knew herself well enough to know that a room full of socializing wasn't what she needed. So she stayed home. And I thought, that is unreflecting. Knowing yourself so completely that you can honor what you actually need without apology, without explanation. She didn't need the event to validate her. She already had her answer. And maybe that's the whole point. Unreflecting isn't the destination. It's the permission slip to get back to the table. To say yes to the room when the room is what you need, and to say not today when your truest self already knows the answer. Either way, you are listening to yourself, and that is personal growth. So here's what I want to leave you with today. Not a journal question, not a framework to apply, just this. You are allowed to be exactly where you are. In whatever your season is asking of you right now, whether you're stepping into something new, stepping back from something familiar, or simply trying to find your footing after the ground shifted beneath you. You don't have to explain it, defend it, or have it perfectly figured out. The most daring thing you can do sometimes isn't a grand leap forward. It's simply showing up to the event, to the table, to your own life, and letting yourself be found there. Until next time, keep moving from dim to daring. Thank you so much for joining me today on Dim to Daring. If this episode resonated with you, I'd love it if you subscribed, shared it with a friend, or left a review. It helps more women just like you discover the show. Remember, you're not finished yet, you're just getting started. Until next time, keep daring to grow and shine.